The Korean Mafia boss panics when system fails. Black janitor girl fixes it and shocks everyone. 2.8 billion Korean wons is about to disappear across 3 continents. The most sophisticated financial network in East Asia is collapsing line by line. 15 elite analysts stare at cascading error messages in absolute horror. While Kang Min-jun, South Korea's most untouchable syndicate leader, watches his entire operation disintegrate minutes before a deal that will either crown him or bury him. System failure, someone gasps. Total lockout. Chaos devours the control room. No one has answers. The most critical transaction in the organization's 40-year history is evaporating. Hundreds of carefully built alliances hang by a thread threatening to snap. But just when all hope seems shattered, a steady voice breaks through the panic. I know what's wrong. I can restore it. Every head whips around in shock. The woman who spoke is 29 years old, wearing a maintenance uniform with a name tag that reads, Amina. She's the night custodian, the invisible person who cleans their offices while they ignore her existence. Tired eyes from working multiple shifts, worn hands from years of unseen labor. Yet in her expression lives an unshakable certainty. What this woman is about to do will stun everyone in that room and prove that the most dangerous intelligence can hide in plain sight. If you love stories about hidden brilliance and unexpected power, hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to know their worth. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment like this. Because sometimes all it takes to change everything is knowledge they never knew you had and the courage to say, I can fix it. The silence held for exactly 4 seconds. Then disbelief erupted. Ade Ji-hoon, the head of technical operations, a 40-year-old man with 2 advanced degrees and a reputation for ruthless efficiency, stepped forward, his face twisted in contempt. What did you say? Who do you think you are? You empty trash bins and mop floors. This is a restricted operations center. Get out. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Analysts exchanging glances as if witnessing something absurd. A broad-shouldered security officer moved toward Amina, hand reaching for her arm. Ma'am, you need to leave now. But Amina didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, shoulders back, eyes level. Not a flicker of doubt. And Kang Min-jun saw it. He'd spent 20 years reading people. Traitors, rivals, politicians, assassins. But he'd never seen eyes like hers. No fear. No performance, just the absolute conviction of someone who knew exactly what she was saying. Stop, Min-jun commanded, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. The security officer released her immediately. Ade Ji-hoon turned toward his boss, stunned. Sir, she's maintenance staff. She has no clearance, no training in our systems. But Min-jun wasn't looking at Ade. He was looking at Amina. You said you can restore it. Explain. Amina took a measured breath. This isn't a random system failure. This is a recursive loop designed to lock you out permanently. Someone with internal access coded it to trigger the moment you initiated the overseas connection protocol. It's designed to look like external penetration, but it's not. The room went deadly quiet. Ade Ji-hoon's face drained of color. That's impossible, he said, voice climbing. How would you even know our architecture? You're a cleaner. Because I've been watching, Amina replied, her tone unervingly calm. 3 weeks ago, you stayed late.
1:47 a.m.
I was finishing the 5th floor server corridor. You thought you were alone. You inserted a modification into the backup authentication sequence. You were careful but not careful enough. I saw the pattern on your screen while you walked away for coffee. The rest I reconstructed on my own system at home. Impossible, Ade stammered, sweat forming at his temples. You don't have the access codes. I don't need access codes, Amina said. I only needed to see the logic structure once. The rest is just math. At that moment, the door opened. Amina Okoye, the facilities supervisor, a 52-year-old woman who'd managed the building's operations for 18 years, entered with urgency in her stride. Mr. Kang, I heard there was an incident involving one of my staff. Amina, you know her?
Min-jun asked.
Sir, I know her very well. Amina has worked here for 3 years. Perfect record. Never late, never complains, even when assigned back-to-back overnight shifts. But 6 months ago, when our entire building automation system crashed and 3 different contractors couldn't diagnose it, she fixed it in 40 minutes. Self-taught programmer. Built her first computer from salvaged parts at 16. If she says she can fix this, I believe her. I'd stake my career on it. Minjun looked from Okoye to Amina, then to Ade Jihoon, who was visibly trembling. He'd survived this long by knowing when someone was lying. And right now, it wasn't the woman in the maintenance uniform. Let her try, Minjun ordered. Ade Jihoon shot to his feet. You cannot let an outsider access the core network. Everything we've built is in there. Minjun turned to him, eyes like polished stone. Sung-ho, he called to his second in command. Keep Ade here. He doesn't leave this room. But to understand how a maintenance worker became the only person who could save a syndicate leader's empire, you have to go back. Back to 11:47 at night. Back to a hotel room in Abuja. Back to a woman named Omadala Taiwo, staring at her phone like it had just ruined her life. But that story would have to wait. Because right now, in this control room, Amina walked toward the main terminal with the measured confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind. It's called a fail-dead protocol, she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. Not a fail-safe. Fail-safe means the system locks down to protect itself. Fail-dead means it destroys itself to protect whoever programmed it. Ade Jihoon's laugh was sharp, brittle. Fail-dead protocols? You learned that from YouTube videos? This is enterprise-level security architecture. Military-grade encryption. You wouldn't even know where to begin. RSA 4096 encryption with quantum-resistant lattice overlay. Amina interrupted, not looking at him. Triple authentication cascade tied to biometric verification and time-stamped geographic markers. Your system pings servers in Singapore, Dubai, and Sao Paulo every 11 seconds to verify legitimate access. She finally turned to face him. Should I continue? Or would you like to keep explaining my own observations back to me? The room went deathly silent. Minjun leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Amina. Go on. Amina gestured toward the cascading error messages on the screens. This wasn't an external breach. No one hacked you. Someone who already had access created a logic bomb. A piece of code that sits dormant until specific conditions are met. Tonight, when you initiated contact with your international partners, the system recognized the connection pattern and executed its programming. Which was? Minjun asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Total data corruption and permanent lockout. Inapproximately, she glanced at the countdown timer on the main screen. 17 minutes, every financial record, communication log, and operational file in this network will be encrypted with a randomized key that even the person who created it won't be able to reverse. Then the key destroys itself. One of the younger analysts whispered, That's scorched earth protocol. Exactly, Amina confirmed. It's not meant to steal. It's meant to erase. Whoever did this wanted to make sure that if they couldn't have this data, nobody could. Ade Jihoon's face had gone from pale to gray. This is absurd. You're making wild accusations based on what? Watching me get coffee. Based on watching you input a 47-line modification into the authentication subroutine, Amina said calmly. You used a portable device. USB-C connection. Blue casing with a white logo. You checked the hallway twice before inserting it, but you never checked the service corridor behind the server racks, where I was replacing air filters. The color drained completely from Jihoon's face. Minjun rose from his chair slowly, his movement drawing every eye in the room. He walked toward Ade with the patient deliberation of a predator. Is this true? Minjun's voice was silk over steel. Sir, Ade's voice cracked. She's a cleaner. Why would you believe? I didn't ask what she is. Minjun cut him off. I asked if it's true. The countdown timer flashed. 16 minutes. Ade opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sweat rolled down his temple. Amina spoke into the crushing silence. The weakness isn't in your main system. It's in the failover architecture. Whoever programmed this assumed you'd try to restore from backup, so they corrupted the backup authentication first. But they made one mistake.
Min Jun turned to her.
Which is, they tested it. Amina's eyes locked onto his. 3 weeks ago, at 2:13 a.m., there was a brief system hiccup that your logs probably recorded as a minor authentication delay. That was the test run. Which means there's a shadow log buried in your auxiliary memory that contains the original encryption pathway. Can you access it?
Min Jun asked.
Yes, Amina said. But I need full system authority, 0 interference, and 30 minutes. 15 minutes blinked on the screen. 30 minutes is more than we have, someone muttered. Amina met Minjun's gaze without flinching. Then I suggest you decide quickly. Minjun's eyes held Amina's for 3 long seconds. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. If you fail, you die. No one breathed. If you succeed, Minjun continued, you'll have earned something very few people in this world possess. My debt. Amina didn't hesitate, didn't blink. Understood. Sir, one of the senior analysts started. Minjun raised a single finger. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. He gestured toward the main terminal. Clear the station. Now. The engineers exchanged uncertain glances but stepped back, forming a semicircle of witnesses. All except Ade Ji-hoon, who remained frozen in his chair, Sung-ho's hand heavy on his shoulder. Amina approached the terminal and reached into her uniform pocket. She pulled out a battered USB drive, its casing cracked, held together with electrical tape, the kind of device that looked like it had survived a dozen near-deaths. Someone laughed nervously. She's going to save a 2.8 billion Korean won's network with that? Amina plugged it in without responding. The screen flickered. Code began scrolling. Not the chaotic cascade of errors, but deliberate surgical commands. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with the rhythm of someone who'd practiced these exact motions in her mind countless times. She's accessing the kernel-level diagnostics, one engineer whispered, impressed despite himself.
Impossible, Ji-hoon spat.
The bypass authentication requires a mirror protocol, Amina finished, not looking up. I know. I wrote one. Her screen split into 4 quadrants. Top left, the countdown timer, now at 13 minutes. Top right, cascading system logs flowing like digital waterfalls. Bottom left, a 3-dimensional map of the network architecture, nodes blinking red like dying stars. Bottom right, her code building itself line by line. You're trying to reconstruct the authentication pathway, one of the younger analysts said, leaning forward. But the encryption is randomized with a 256-bit seed, Amina confirmed. Which is why I'm not breaking it. I'm replacing it. Ji-hoon leaned forward, confusion breaking through his fear. That's theoretically impossible. The system won't accept. It will if I convince it that my heartbeat is its heartbeat, Amina said. Her hands never stopped moving. Every system has a pulse, a core rhythm it uses to verify its own processes. Your saboteur corrupted that rhythm, but they couldn't erase it completely without crashing the system before the timer ran out. So there's an echo, a ghost rhythm buried in the auxiliary cache. She pressed enter. The bottom left quadrant erupted in activity. I'm listening to that echo now, mapping it. Once I have the complete signature, I can synthesize it and feed it back to the system as verification that I'm the legitimate authentication source. You don't break the lock, Minjun said quietly, understanding dawning. You become the key. Exactly. 10 minutes. Amina's fingers flew faster. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her eyes, already tired, now burned with exhaustion and absolute focus. One of the facility's managers, a woman who'd worked alongside Amina on night shifts, spoke up softly. She works 3 jobs. The maintenance here, data entry at a medical clinic, weekend inventory at a warehouse in Itaewon. I don't think she sleeps more than 4 hours a night. Minjun's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. 7 minutes. A node on the network map blinked from red to yellow. Then another. Then 5 more. It's working, someone breathed. Don't celebrate yet, Amina muttered. The cascade reversal hasn't. The screen went black. Every display in the room died. Ji-hoon laughed. A desperate, broken sound. She killed it. She actually killed. Then the screens blazed back to life. Green. Every node. Every connection. Every authentication protocol. The countdown timer froze at 1 minute and 17 seconds. Then disappeared entirely, replaced by a simple message. System restored. Full operational capacity. The timestamp read, 11:59 p.m. Amina pulled the USB drive from the port and slumped back in the chair, her hands trembling with exhaustion. The control room erupted, not in celebration, but in stunned, breathless disbelief.
Min-yoon walked forward slowly, stopping beside Amina's chair.
He looked down at her, this woman in a faded uniform who'd just saved his empire, and spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. Who are you? Amina looked up at him, exhausted and clear-eyed. Someone who's been underestimated her entire life, she said. Just like you planned on doing. Amina tried to stand, her legs folded beneath her. She caught the edge of the desk, knuckles white, breathing hard. The adrenaline that had carried her through 30 minutes of surgical precision drained out of her all at once, leaving behind only exhaustion and the trembling reality of what she'd just done. Someone get her water. One of the analysts started. Min-joon moved first. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, catching Amina's elbow before she could collapse completely. His grip was firm but careful, the hands of someone who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. I'm fine, Amina said automatically, the reflex of someone who'd never been allowed to not be fine. You're not, Min-joon replied quietly. He guided her back into the chair. Seungo, water, and something with sugar. The room watched in stunned silence as South Korea's most feared syndicate leader crouched beside a janitor's chair, studying her with an intensity usually reserved for enemies and contracts. That's when he saw her hands. Not just tired, not just overworked, scarred. Chemical burns across 3 fingers on her left hand, the kind you got from industrial cleaning solutions without proper gloves. Calluses layered on calluses. A recently healed cut across her right palm that she'd clearly wrapped herself, the bandaging amateur but effective. These were hands that had scrubbed floors, lifted heavy equipment, worked without complaint in conditions that would make most people quit after 1 shift. These were the hands that had just saved his empire. Amina Okoye, the facility's supervisor, approached cautiously. Sir, if I may, Amina supports her younger brother's university tuition, her mother's medical care. She sends money back to family in Nigeria every month. The 3 jobs aren't ambition, they're survival. Min-joon didn't respond. He was still looking at Amina's hands. Sung-ho returned with water and a protein bar. Amina accepted both with a quiet thank you, and drank like someone who'd forgotten to hydrate for the past 12 hours, because she probably had. Clear the room, Min-joon said suddenly. Everyone except her. The engineers filed out. Even Sung-ho hesitated, then nodded and left, pulling a protesting Ade Ji-hoon with him. The door closed. The silence that followed was different from before. Not tense with crisis, but heavy with something harder to name. Min-joon stood, walked to the window overlooking Seoul's night skyline, then turned back to face her. My office. Can you walk? Amina set down the water bottle. Yes. Then follow me. Min-joon's private office was nothing like the sterile control room. Dark wood, minimal furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look small and conquerable. A single photograph on the desk. A young woman with kind eyes, frozen in time. Min-joon poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. He set one in front of her and kept the other. Your father, he said without preamble. Samuel Adebayo. He died 6 years ago. Lagos port accident. Officially ruled equipment failure. Amina's hand froze halfway to the glass. Min-joon continued, his voice even. You were 23. studying computer engineering at university. You dropped out 3 weeks after his death to work full-time. You've been working ever since. How do you? I make it my business to know who enters my buildings, Minjun said. But I didn't know what you could do. That was my mistake. Amina's jaw tightened. Why are you telling me about my father? Minjun took a slow sip of whiskey, watching her over the rim. Because 6 years ago I lost someone too. Someone who knew things she wasn't supposed to know. Someone who asked the wrong questions to the wrong people. He gestured toward the photograph on his desk. Her name was Jiun. She was a financial analyst. Smart. Too smart. She found irregularities in shipping manifests. Routes that didn't match cargo weights. Deliveries that disappeared from records. Amina's breathing slowed. 2 weeks after she brought it to her supervisor, Minjun said quietly, there was an accident at Lagos port. Equipment failure. 3 people died. The room tilted. Your father was a logistics coordinator, Minjun continued. He verified container contents. He would have seen the same irregularities Jiun saw. He would have known something was wrong. Amina's voice came out raw. You're saying my father was murdered. I'm saying, Minjun replied, that the sabotage you just stopped tonight, the person who programmed it works for the same people who killed your father. And they've been operating inside my organization for 6 years. He set down his glass and met her eyes with absolute clarity. Ade Jihoon didn't act alone. And whoever he's working for just learned that I have someone who can see what they've been hiding. The implication hung in the air like a blade. Which means, Minjun said softly, you just became the most dangerous person in Seoul. To them. And possibly to me. Amina stared at him, her exhaustion replaced by something colder and sharper. Then I guess, she said quietly, we both have questions that need answering. Minjun refilled his glass but left hers untouched. He returned to the window, hands clasped behind his back, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. Hanseong Group owns 43 legitimate businesses across Asia. He began, his voice measured. Shipping, real estate, technology consulting. On paper, we're clean. In practice, we control logistics networks that move everything the law pretends doesn't exist. Amina listened without interrupting. For the last 18 months, shipments have been disappearing. Not stolen, redirected. Small enough that individual losses look like clerical errors. Large enough that someone is building a secondary network inside mine. He turned to face her. Tonight wasn't about destroying my data. It was about proving they could. A demonstration, Amina said quietly. A test, Minjun corrected. They wanted to see how I'd respond. Whether my security was as sophisticated as they feared. Whether I had anyone capable of stopping them. His eyes locked onto hers. You just answered that question for them. The weight of it settled on Amina's shoulders like a physical thing. So they'll come for me now. If they're smart, yes. Minjun's expression didn't change. If they're arrogant, they'll assume you're a useful idiot who got lucky. Either way, you're visible now. And visibility in my world is often a death sentence. He walked back to his desk and opened a drawer. From it, he pulled a folder thin, unmarked, and set it in front of her. This is everything I've compiled on the conspiracy. Names, dates, financial trails that lead nowhere. And 3 people I know are compromised. Jihoon, obviously. A shipping coordinator in Busan named Park. And someone higher up whose identity I haven't confirmed. Amina didn't touch the folder. Why are you showing me this? Because you have a choice. Minjun sat down across from her. His posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. You can walk out of this building tonight. I'll pay you well for your silence and your service. Enough to cover your brother's tuition for the next 5 years. Enough that you never have to work 3 jobs again. He paused. Or you can stay. Help me find who killed your father. Rebuild my security infrastructure from the ground up. And accept that doing so will make you a target for people who've already proven they're willing to kill. The office was so quiet Amina could hear her own heartbeat. If I walk away, she said slowly, they still know I exist. They still know I stopped them tonight.
Min-yoon nodded once.
True. And if my father was murdered because he saw too much, then leaving now doesn't keep me safe. It just makes me a loose end. Her voice steadied. Which means I'm already in this war. The only question is whether I fight it blind or informed. Something flickered in Min-joon's expression, respect, maybe, or recognition. You understand quickly, he said. I've been surviving my entire life, Amina replied. This is just a different kind of survival. Min-joon leaned back in his chair. Then we have an arrangement. Effective immediately, your chief security architect. You report directly to me. You'll have access to everything: systems, personnel files, financial records. You'll rebuild our infrastructure with the assumption that every line of existing code is compromised. And Ji-hoon remains in place, Min-joon said coldly, under surveillance. If we remove him now, whoever he reports to will know we're hunting them. Better to let him think he's still useful. Feed him misinformation. Watch where it goes. Amina processed this. You're using him as bait. I'm using everyone as what they're worth, Min-joon corrected. Including you. The honesty was brutal and strangely refreshing. Amina stood, her exhaustion temporarily forgotten. I'll need equipment, a secure workspace, and access to the original system architecture before Ji-hoon touched it. You'll have it by morning. I'll need it in 3 hours, Amina countered. Because if we're assuming the enemy is watching, every hour I'm not working is an hour they're adjusting their strategy.
Min-yoon smiled, small, genuine, dangerous.
3 hours, then. He extended his hand. Amina looked at it. The hand of a man who controlled empires and ended lives, and shook it firmly. One more thing, Min-joon said as she turned to leave. From now on, you don't clean floors. You don't defer to anyone in this building except me. And if anyone treats you like you're still invisible, his smile turned cold. Let me know. At 2:47 a.m., in a secured server room deep in Hanseong Tower, Amina sat before 6 blank monitors, a cup of terrible coffee, and an empty code base. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then they began to move. Line by line, function by function, she started building something new. A system that wouldn't just resist attack, but one that would hunt back. And somewhere in the building, Ade Ji-hoon made a phone call he thought was private. But Min-joon was already listening. 3 weeks later, the Hanseong Tower conference room held a different kind of silence. Not the mocking disbelief from before. This was respect born from necessity, sharpened by fear. Amina stood at the head of the table, a wireless presenter in hand, exhaustion hidden beneath tailored professionalism. Gone was the maintenance uniform. In its place, simple black, practical but deliberate. The clothes of someone who no longer apologized for occupying space. Behind her, 6 monitors displayed a network visualization that pulsed like a living organism. Nodes connecting, data flowing, patterns emerging in real time. This is Obsidian Gate, she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd earned the right to be heard. It's not just a security system, it's a behavioral intelligence framework. The 15 people around the table, department heads, senior analysts, Min-joon's inner circle, watched in silence. Traditional security reacts, Amina continued. Someone tries to breach, you block them. Someone steals data, you trace them. But by then, damage is done. Obsidian Gate doesn't wait for attacks. Predicts them. She clicked. The visualization shifted, highlighting a cluster of unusual activity. Every person in this organization creates a digital signature, login patterns, file access rhythms, communication frequency. Obsidian Gate maps those signatures and establishes baseline behavior. Then it watches for deviations. AI surveillance, one of the senior analysts said, uncomfortable. Pattern recognition, Amina corrected. If someone who normally accesses financial reports twice a week suddenly pulls them 40 times in 3 days, Obsidian flags it. If encrypted communications spike outside normal business hours, flagged. If file transfers route through unusual servers, flagged. She clicked again. A single node turned red. Like this. The room leaned forward. 3 days ago, Someone in logistics accessed container manifests for shipments that were already finalized and delivered. Not unusual. Except they accessed them at 3:17 a.m. from a device that wasn't their assigned workstation. Ade Ji-hoon shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but remained silent. He'd barely spoken in meetings since that night, his presence reduced to obligatory attendance. Who? Min-jun asked from the far end of the table, his tone neutral. Park Sung-min, Amina said. Shipping coordinator. Busan office. The name landed like a stone in still water. Amina Okoye, the facilities supervisor who'd become Amina's unexpected mentor and advocate, spoke up quietly from her seat. Park's been with us for 12 years. Clean record. Had a clean record, Amina corrected gently. Until Obsidian noticed he was routing manifests through a secondary server in Manila that doesn't appear in any of our official documentation. She pulled up transaction logs, routing paths, timestamps, a web of evidence that told a story without requiring interpretation. He's not stealing, Amina continued. He's duplicating, creating parallel records, which means someone else is running shadow shipments using our infrastructure. Min-jun's expression remained unreadable, but his fingers drummed once against the table, a tell that Amina had learned to recognize. Where is Park now? He asked. In his office, Sung-ho replied. Unaware that we know. Keep it that way, Min-jun ordered. Then, to Amina, can Obsidian trace where the duplicated data is going? Already done. Amina clicked through 3 more screens. The Manila server is a relay. From there, the data routes through Hong Kong, then Sao Paulo, then, she paused, Lagos. The room temperature seemed to drop.
Minyones Eisnerot.
Lagos. Specifically, Apapa Port. The same port where my father died. Amina's voice remained steady, professional, but something cold burned beneath it. And the records show that Park has been routing data there for 6 years. Since 2 months after my father's death. Ji-hoon finally spoke, his voice tight. This could be coincidence. It's not. Amina cut him off, her tone sharp enough to silence him. Because Park's communications don't go to a company. They go to a person. A logistics consultant named Tund Yakub. She clicked one final time. A photograph appeared on the screen. A man in his 40s. Well-dressed, confident smile. Standing beside a shipping container with the Hanseong Group logo barely visible in the background. Yakub operates as a middleman for multiple organizations, Amina continued. Officially, he's an independent contractor. Unofficially, according to financial forensics I've been running, he's the architect of the secondary network that's been bleeding your operations. Min-jun stood slowly, walking toward the screen, studying the photograph with the focus of a predator identifying prey. And 6 years ago? Amina pulled up another document, an old port manifest, water-damaged but legible. 6 years ago, Tund Yakub was the last person to sign off on the container shipment that malfunctioned and killed 3 people, including my father. The silence that followed was absolute. Min-jun turned to face the room. Park Sung-min will be detained quietly. No formal charges yet. We watch him, we listen, and we see who reaches out. He looked at Amina. And you, he said quietly. Find me everything on Tund Yakub, every transaction, every contact, every lie he's ever told. Amina met his gaze, already compiling it. As the meeting dispersed, Amina Okoye approached her younger namesake with concern softening her features. Are you okay? Amina closed her laptop, her hands steady. I'm perfect, she said, because now I know exactly who I'm hunting. Amina hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her private workspace, once a repurposed storage room, now a command center, glowed with the light of 8 monitors. Financial records cascaded down screens like digital rain. Shell companies, offshore accounts, transaction patterns that had been invisible for years, now exposed under Obsidian Gate's relentless analysis. And at the center of it all, Tund Yakub. Min-jun entered without knocking, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside her keyboard, his eyes scanning the screens with practiced efficiency. Tell me you have something concrete, he said. Amina didn't look away from her work. Better than concrete. I have math. She pulled up a network visualization that looked like a spider's web drawn by someone who understood geometry too well. Jakub doesn't just move cargo. He moves ghosts, shipments that exist in paperwork but not in physical space. Here, she highlighted a transaction. Container manifest shows 12 tons of machinery parts leaving Lagos, arriving in Busan. Except the weight measurements at both ports don't match. The container that left Lagos was 3 tons heavier than the one that arrived. Substitution, Minjun said immediately. Exactly. The real cargo gets swapped at sea. The false manifest continues to its official destination. The real cargo disappears into a secondary network. Amina pulled up another layer. And Jakub's been running this operation through 17 shell companies across 9 countries for 6 years. She clicked through a dizzying array of corporate structures, each one a facade, each one legally registered, each one designed to create plausible deniability. Port Authority International, Westbridge Logistics, Meridian Trade Solutions. Amina's voice was clinical, precise. All registered to different addresses. All sharing the same IP block for their email servers. All routing financial transactions through the same intermediary bank in Sao Paulo.
Minjun leaned closer.
That's sloppy. It's arrogant, Amina corrected. He's been operating for so long without consequences that he stopped being careful. And that's where Obsidian caught him. She pulled up the final piece, a reconstructed timeline that connected Jakub's shell network to specific incidents over 6 years. Missing shipments, port accidents, 3 deaths in Lagos, 2 in Manila, 1 in Busan. Your father wasn't collateral damage, Amina said quietly. He was targeted because he verified container contents. He would have noticed the weight discrepancies. He would have reported them.
Minjun's expression darkened.
And Jakub silenced him. With help, Amina turned in her chair to face him. I need to bring someone in. 20 minutes later, Ade Jihoon sat across from them, pale and sweating despite the air conditioning. Amina slid a folder across the table. May 2019. You authorized a system update that changed how weight measurements were logged in our manifest database. Jihoon's hands trembled. That was routine maintenance. It was a backdoor, Amina interrupted. One that allowed specific shipments to bypass automated verification checks. And 3 weeks after you installed it, the first ghost shipment went through our network. She pulled up communication logs, encrypted, but Obsidian Gate had cracked them days ago. You've been in contact with Jakub for 7 years. Not frequently, just enough. He paid you through a consulting firm in Singapore. Small amounts. Unremarkable. Smart. Jihoon's voice came out as a rasp. You can't prove. I can prove everything, Amina said, her tone colder than Minjun had ever heard it. Bank transfers. Encrypted emails. The fact that every shipment anomaly in our network coincides with a system access from your credentials. She leaned forward. You helped kill my father. Not with your hands. With your code. Jihoon's face crumpled. I didn't know. They said it was just cargo. I didn't know anyone would. But you knew something was wrong. Amina cut him off. And you chose money over asking questions. Minjun spoke for the first time. You have 2 options. Cooperate fully, and I hand you to law enforcement with a recommendation for leniency. Or refuse, and I handle this my way. The threat needed no elaboration.
Jihoon chose coopération.
72 hours later, coordinated raids hit 17 locations across 9 countries. Port Authority International's offices in Lagos. Empty by the time police arrived, but hard drives seized. Westbridge Logistics in Manila. 4 arrests, including 2 port officials. And in Sao Paulo, in a luxury apartment overlooking the bay, Tund Jakub was taken into custody while eating breakfast. He didn't resist. He didn't need to. His lawyers were already on the phone. But Amina had anticipated that. Financial crimes carry extradition treaties, she explained to Minjun as they watched news coverage from her command center. And his operation crossed enough jurisdictions that he'll face charges in at least 6 countries. Even with the best lawyers, he's looking at 15 to 20 years. You could have asked me to handle this differently, Minjun said quietly. Amina met his eyes. You would have killed him. Yes. And that would have made him a martyr. A ghost story. Someone who disappeared and might return. She turned back to the screen, where Yakub was being led away in handcuffs. This way he rots in a cell. Public record. Legal process.
No misteri. No legend.
Just a criminal who got caught. Minjun studied her profile. This woman who'd transformed from invisible janitor to the architect of an empire security in less than 2 months. You're more dangerous than I thought, he said, and it sounded like a compliment. Amina allowed herself a small, tired smile. Good, because we're not done yet. She pulled up one final file, the mystery third conspirator, the one whose identity had remained hidden. Yakub kept insurance files, she said. Bank accounts, communication logs, names. The file opened. Minjun's expression went very still. The name at the top of the list was someone inside his inner circle. Someone in that room. The courtroom in Lagos was packed. Journalists, families of victims, port workers who'd lost colleagues to accidents that were finally being called what they were, murders disguised as negligence. Amina watched from the gallery, her expression neutral, as the judge read the verdict. Tund Yakub, you are hereby sentenced to 23 years imprisonment without possibility of parole for charges including conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, trafficking, and corruption of public officials across multiple jurisdictions. The words continued, but Amina had stopped listening after 23 years. Her father had been dead for 6. The math would never balance. But this public accounting, this legal dismantling of a man who'd thought himself untouchable, this was something. Outside the courthouse, Amina Okoye stood waiting, umbrella raised against the Lagos rain. Your father would be proud, the older woman said quietly. Amina nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Back in Seoul, Hanseong Tower stood exactly as it had 2 months ago. Glass and steel, indifferent to the earthquake that had moved through its foundation. But inside, everything had changed. The third conspirator, a senior finance officer named Choi, had been quietly removed. Not arrested, not executed, simply relocated to a position in a subsidiary company in rural Indonesia where his access was limited and his every move monitored. Minjun's justice wasn't always public. The board meeting that followed was different from any in Hanseong's 40-year history. Representatives from 3 governments sat in as observers. Financial regulators, anti-corruption officials, all nodding with satisfaction as Minjun presented reformed operations, transparent logistics protocols, and a security architecture that had already identified and prevented 2 attempted breaches from competitor organizations. Hanseong Group is now the standard by which legitimate international trade will be measured, the lead regulator declared, which was exactly what Minjun had wanted. The underground empire remained. The connections, the influence, the quiet power that moved beneath official channels, all intact. But now it was wrapped in legitimacy so thorough that investigating it would require proving that transparency itself was a lie. Minjun had won by becoming untouchable through visibility. And Amina had built the system that made it possible. 3 weeks later, Amina stood in her command center, no longer a repurposed storage room, but a proper operations hub with a team of 6 analysts reporting to her. The maintenance uniform was gone, folded away in a box in her apartment that she couldn't quite bring herself to throw out. She wore professional clothes now, had an apartment in Gangnam that didn't leak when it rained. Her brother's tuition was paid through graduation. Her mother's medical bills were cleared. Everything had changed. And yet, when she looked in the mirror, she still saw the same person who'd mopped floors at 2 a.m. and taught herself programming from library computers. You're thinking too hard. Amina turned. Ade Okoye, no longer just a facility supervisor, but director of operations, stood in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. Just remembering where I started, Amina said. Koye smiled. You started brilliant. You just started invisible. She handed Amina the tea. Now you're both brilliant and seen. That's rarer than you think. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Obsidian Gates displays pulse with data, monitoring, protecting, hunting threats before they materialized. Do you regret it? Okoye asked quietly. Stepping into this world? Amina considered the question honestly. I regret that I had to. I don't regret that I did. The distinction mattered. A knock at the door. Sung-ho entered, his usual serious expression somehow softer around the edges. Mr. Kong would like to see you, he said. His office. Private. Min-jun stood by his window. The city spread below him like a kingdom he'd built from shadows and will. You've exceeded every expectation, he said without turning around. Obsidian Gate is functioning beyond projections. The organization is secure. Our enemies are either imprisoned or cautious. You've accomplished in 2 months what others couldn't in years. Amina waited. There was more coming. Min-jun turned to face her. Which is why I'm offering you a choice. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Amina sat. You can stay, Min-jun said. Continue as chief security architect. Build systems, hunt threats, protect this empire. You'll be well compensated. Protected. Powerful. He paused. Or you can leave. Walk away with everything you've earned, the money, the skills, the reputation, and build something of your own. No obligations. No debts. Clean separation. Amina studied him carefully. You're giving me freedom. I'm giving you a choice, Min-jun corrected. Freedom is what you make with it. The office was silent except for the distant hum of the city. Why? Amina asked. You could just keep me here. I'm useful. I know too much to leave safely.
Min-jun smiled faintly.
Because Ji-yoon never got a choice. She saw the truth and it killed her. You've earned something different. His expression grew serious. But understand, if you stay completely. There's no halfway in this world. You'll see things that can't be unseen. Make decisions that can't be unmade. He leaned forward. So I'm asking you, Amina, what do you want? The rooftop of Hanseong Tower was off-limits to everyone except Min-jun. Until tonight, Amina stepped out into the cold Seoul air, her breath misting in front of her face. The city sprawled in every direction. Millions of lights, millions of lives, all moving forward without knowing how close they'd come to chaos 2 months ago. Min-jun stood at the edge, hands in his pockets, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. I used to come up here when I was building this, he said without preamble. When it was just me and 3 other people who believed my vision wasn't insane. He glanced at her. It helped to see the city from above. To remember I was fighting for something bigger than survival. Amina joined him at the railing, the wind pulling at her coat. Have you decided?
Min-jun asked.
She'd been awake all night thinking about it. About her brother, graduating next year with opportunities she'd never had. About her mother, healthy for the first time in a decade. About the apartment in Gangnam and the respect in people's eyes when she entered a room. About the worn USB drive still sitting on her desk, cracked casing held together with electrical tape. I could leave, Amina said slowly. Take the money. Start a consulting firm. Live quietly. Safely. You could, Min-jun agreed. But that's not why I learned to code on library computers. It's not why I worked 3 jobs while teaching myself system architecture. She turned to face him. I didn't do all of that just to survive. I did it to matter.
Min-jun listened without interrupting.
My father died because he saw something wrong and no one listened. Because he was just a logistics coordinator. Just another worker. Just invisible enough to eliminate without consequence. Her voice steadied. I'm not leaving because walking away now would prove that people like us, people who started invisible, only matter when we're useful to someone more powerful. She met his eyes directly. I'm staying because I want to build something that makes sure the next person like me, the next janitor, the next invisible genius, doesn't have to wait for a crisis to be seen. Min-jun studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, genuine, without calculation. Then we have work to do, he said simply. They stood in silence, watching the city breathe. You know, Min-jun said after a while, when Sung-ho first told me a janitor wanted to fix our systems, I almost had you removed from the building. I thought you were insane or a plant from a rival organization. What changed your mind? Your eyes, he said. You looked at me the way Jiun used to look at problems. Like you already knew the answer and were just waiting for permission to prove it. Amina smiled faintly. I was terrified. You didn't show it. I couldn't afford to. They lapsed back into comfortable silence. Below them, the city continued its endless motion. Cars flowing like blood through arteries. Buildings lit with the labor of people who would never know how close their world had come to collapse. Office workers finishing late shifts. Security guards making rounds. Janitors emptying trash cans and mopping floors, invisible to everyone around them. One of them might be brilliant. One of them might be watching, learning, waiting for the moment when invisibility becomes their greatest weapon. Minjun checked his watch. The board meeting is at 9 tomorrow. First item. Approving your proposal for a training program. Identifying talent in unconventional places. Hidden talent, Amina corrected. Not unconventional, just hidden. Noted. Minjun turned toward the door, then paused. One more thing. That USB drive you still keep on your desk. The one that looks like it survived a war. Amina tensed slightly. What about it? Don't throw it away, Minjun said. Men like me need reminders that empires aren't built by people who started powerful. They're built by people who refused to stay invisible. He disappeared through the door, leaving Amina alone with the city and the wind. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a photo she'd kept for 6 years, her father at Lagosport, wearing his safety vest, smiling at the camera like he had all the time in the world. I saw them, Papa, she whispered to the night, and I made sure everyone else did too. The wind carried her words away. Below, Seoul moved forward. Millions of lives intersecting, millions of stories unfolding. All unaware that the most powerful security system in East Asia had been built by a woman who once mopped their floors. A woman they never saw, until the moment she decided to be seen. And when that moment came, she didn't just save an empire. She proved that genius doesn't announce itself with credentials and corner offices. Sometimes it arrives in a maintenance uniform, holding a worn USB drive, and says the 5 words that change everything. I know what's wrong. The city lights glittered like stars. Amina pulled her coat tighter and smiled. Then she went back inside. There was work to do. The most powerful person in the room was once the janitor no one saw. And now she was the reason empires rose or fell. Not with violence, but with vision. Not with force, but with the quiet certainty that intelligence, once invisible, is the most dangerous weapon of all. If you enjoyed the story this far, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter and enjoy more story from us. And if this story gave you chills, drop a like and share it with someone who loves powerful romance with a dangerous edge. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you.